Hello and welcome. You're viewing the Citizens Journalist podcast, Mesa County Compass, that brings you the news that you can use from a different point of view. I'm Ruth.
I'm Lisa.
And together we are Mesa County Compass. Our goal is to create an informed, current, active citizenry armed with the facts. We will be covering what's new to you, what it means to you, what you can do about it, and provide you access to the decision makers when we can. Good afternoon. Welcome to Mesa County Compass. Today we're doing an interview with Dianne Schwenke, who is the advocate between the homeowners and the home builders and the Realtor Association. Yep. Welcome, Dianne.
Thank you. And you've been having a lot of fun today. You came in so happy and so enthused about a conference that you've been today in Wrightville.
Yes.
So tell us some of the things that they were proposing. And you said we don't need more affordable housing. We need to make housing affordable. And how did they suggest that we do it? And how much is government involved in it?
So it was interesting. So this was called the Garfield County Housing Summit. And it was actually some of their folks came over and saw our housing summit last February. And so said, we need to do that. So they actually invited a whole bunch of people to sit on a variety of panels. So we had 4 town managers and the county administrator on one. We had 4 developers, private developers on one. We had 5 nonprofit folks. And so we tried to kind of cover all of the areas.
Wow. Okay.
And then we actually also had something that we didn't have last winter was we had a kind of a wrap-up panel around how do we move forward. And that was something we learned from the one here. People wanted to know, what do we do now? Mm-hmm. And so, and it was fascinating. And we did have the Common Sense Institute, DJ Summers came in and shared some things with regard to their recent housing affordability update, which if you haven't read it, you should just go to csi.org, I think is their website.
Real quick, just a real quick summary of that, because that was really scary about where Grand Junction is in terms of affordability.
Oh, it was so scary. Well, it's scary. First of all, I'll start with the state, which was scary, and then it got even scarier when it got closer to home. So their recent analysis shows that Colorado ranks 49th out of 50 states in terms of housing affordability.
Oh,
we have now surpassed California in terms of being unaffordable. The only place that is less affordable than Colorado right now is Hawaii.
Oh, yeah.
That is bad.
That makes sense.
And and so there are implications for people who might want to live here but won't because we're so unaffordable. I mean, we've gotten to that point. And then they took a look at, I think it was 9 counties, the 9 largest counties overall in the state. Mm-hmm. Mesa was included in that. And in the case of Mesa County, we have grown in terms of being unaffordable at a rate that's much higher than any of the other counties. So in terms of percentage of unaffordability, we outpace Denver, we outpace Boulder, and just from the middle of 2024 to the middle of 2025.
Okay, I'm going to ask why.
Well, I think we could get into some of those things. I mean, we've been advocating that nobody's looking at the cost of regulations on the affordability of housing, and in particularly the city of Grand Junction, where the overwhelming majority of the housing inventory is being built. We've had a new transportation and engineering design standards that some have called gold-plated. We've increased impact fees on even the smaller square footage homes. At least until very recently, it could take you 18 months to get through the city planning process. Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, these are things that are just in Mesa County, because when you take a look at all the state, the new energy codes and greenhouse gas reduction and all of the things that we need to do that, every county had to do that. But we ended up growing even faster in terms of not being affordable. And I think that should be a wake-up call for every policymaker in the state. I mean, in the state, in the county. That should,
Mhm.
county
Should,
commissioners
indeed.
should be looking at that. City of Grand Junction, Palisade, Fruita, anybody who has anything to say about, the regulations on development should be taking a hard look at that.
That's exactly.
Yep.
Mhm.
So anyway, I digress because you
That's
were
okay.
asking about.
Sorry. I just had to ask that other one.
Well,
Just,
no, and I
get in
get,
there
I
while the
get,
iron's
I
hot.
get excited. So anyway, that was where we started the morning, and then we had a panel of employers talking about their workforce needs and how many people are actually commuting from here to work in Rifle,
Mm.
and also from further up Valley because they just can't find homes. And then we actually, probably the two panels that I found most interesting was a panel of private developers who basically were asked, what are you doing in this space in terms of the housing stock, and what are you building, and then what would you like to see in order to enable that? And we had a gentleman, John Kirsten, who kind of started out talking about the fact that he is able to afford. He's a free market person. We heard a lot of people saying you can't build market rate and have people be able to, move in them.
Mhm.
He was talking about that he actually just built a development of small homes that start at $359,000, and that's in Garfield County,
Mm.
which
That's
runs the gamut.
amazing in itself.
And he
Mhm.
goes, I didn't ask for anything. He goes, I didn't get subsidies. I didn't use grants. And he goes, I could do more of those. But he said the one thing that they're running into, which I also found interesting, is he said, where I would like help from local government is on what they call the horizontal infrastructure, the streets
Mhm.
and sidewalks and that sort of thing, because the banks are now not lending for that at the level that they were,
Huh.
which I found very interesting. And so, and the others were, we actually had Sean Ruse, who's the general manager of Clayton Homes
Mhm.
here, who's doing a project in Parachute with their modular manufactured homes.
Mhm.
And again, kind of across that panel, I heard some familiar themes in terms of how long it takes to get through the process. And then also in terms of you're given incentives, and grants for people making 80% of average median income. And we want to be able to provide for the work, our workers.
Mhm.
And so anyway, he goes, I could do a lot more. He said, you could do things, you could waive fees, you could help me with the infrastructure, and I could do more if you would just do those things. I don't want a handout, just take away some of the barriers.
Mhm.
And then we had a question in there about, if you had a magic wand,
Mhm. My favorite.
yeah, what one thing would you change? And one of the developers said, this is going to sound really unorthodox, but he goes, I'm going to tell you right now. He said, we should just do away with zoning. He said, nobody gets it right. Nobody does it right. Houston has never had zoning code, this land use and development code. You're constantly changing it to try and tweak it for this, for this community amenity or another community amenity. He goes, if you just took away zoning, he said, I could find a lot more parcels to build on. I will meet with the neighbors. I will, work with them and make sure the neighborhood is preserved. And he goes, that's better done between me and the neighbors than it is having the government use a one size fits all.
Yeah.
What do you think
exactly
of
how
that?
you're doing.
I was kind of shocked. I had not thought about that,
Uh-huh.
frankly. And I have always thought, well, when we look at some of these things, it's like, okay, we do need. If I lived in a neighborhood, I wouldn't want a whole bunch of
Modular homes.
or duplexes,
Oh,
or some of those multifamily options, which is what they're now promoting with increased density.
Right.
And so I get that piece of it, but again, this the one size fits all thing is something that really for me is it is. I see the state doing it to those of us on the western slope with some of their air quality things and some of their other, and it's like zoning does the same thing. It tries to codify what every development is going to have to look like, be like, setbacks, all
They do all of that, and then you've got HOAs on top of that.
and then you've got the HOAs. And so I was kind of intrigued by that idea, frankly. And someone else was noting, he goes, I have innovative projects. I have ways that I can be very creative in terms of, creating housing that's affordable for our workforce. But he said, then I'll go to the local government. It's like, oh no, you can't build that.
Mm.
And so the builder private developer community was very vocal in this one.
Mm.
And I mean, we're neighbors. We're not that far apart.
Right.
And I've heard the same thing here. It's just not in the formal setting with 85 people in the room
Mm-hmm.
that we had for this. So hopefully some people kind of heard that. The other one that I found was really interesting was we did have the local government piece, and it ran the gamut from the county administrator. They have inclusionary zoning.
Oh, what does that mean?
And so inclusionary zoning in Garfield County means that if you're doing a development, you have to dedicate so many units, a certain percentage of your units, to be affordable housing in meeting that area median income.
Mm-hmm.
And then what typically happens when I talk to builders and developers is, okay, if I have to have this unit sell for 100,000 and I have 150,000, then I put the other 50,000 on the rest of it. So it drives up the cost.
Right.
Again,
It defeats the purpose.
It
Right.
defeats in my view, it defeats the purpose. And he was so proud of the fact, and I think they're also deed restricted, that over the course of 20 years, they now have 100 units that are like that. And I'm like, that's, again, that is not something I would advocate for.
Mm-hmm.
Then we had the town manager of Silt, who's like, so I'm from the government, I'm here to help you. And in terms of what we do to help with affordable housing, we don't. We get in your way. We know we get in your way.
Mm.
The only thing I can do is try and not get so much in your way.
Oh.
And so, it was,
That's kind of an interesting thought.
it was, but he said, the thing is, and they were clear on this, they can't operate alone. They have state statutes, they have state laws, they have state reporting requirements. And frankly, in some cases, if they want to access the Proposition 123 money that we all voted on for affordable housing, they have to do certain things.
Mm.
And so, it's not.
And that would be making sure that 20% is for.
That's one thing. They have to do
restriction.
right. They have to do a housing needs assessment. They have to have a housing action plan. And we can get into where Grand Junction is with that in a minute. But anyway, so he was like, yeah, he said, if it were up to me, really, we would just step aside and let you guys build. And so we ran the gamut in terms of the local governments.
Interesting.
Yeah. And some of them, one of them, I think it's the city of Rifle, is looking at impact fees, and that will be interesting. But the other thing that the city of Rifle has done, and we have some of this coming up in our county as well, is they have said we are sticking with the 2009 energy code. And we're not adopting anything more than the 2009 energy code, which frankly, when we look at the 2021, the 2024, and now some of the mandates that are coming down with the new energy code, it's like that adds an incredible amount of cost when you're looking at insulation and you're looking at, all of these things. And if you have so many units, you have to have EV charging and bicycle storage and all the rest of it. All that adds costs.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
And they can choose what energy code, because didn't we at city council, wasn't that one of the things that they just talked about, the building codes that they adopted, and they said, well, no, we didn't tweak them much or anything. And I'm like, I have friends that are in construction and they say, we can't afford to help. We just can't.
So I think honestly, we're kind of coming to probably some sort of a challenge between the state and municipalities. And I mean, even Mesa County is not looking at going to the 2024 code.
Good.
They're looking at going to the 2021 code, and they're hoping to be able to avoid some of the new energy code requirements. But there's a question around, again, whether or not that's going to be possible. So, so yeah, I thought that was very interesting that they're still on the 2009 energy code.
Yes, and why not?
Yeah.
Is it obviously they haven't been challenged by the state, or the state hasn't found out about it yet? Or something. Help them out, Dianne.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But anyway, but it was fascinating. And even with the nonprofits, and they have, I think it's called the Roaring Fork, Habitat for Humanity,
Mhm.
and they're doing multifamily, they're doing in and doing conversions. They're doing a lot of interesting things that I think, frankly, here, if we had some of the things, the tools that they have, that we might be looking at. And so they said, we're no longer just building 8 or 10 units a year.
Right.
And we're
right.
so,
Right.
and they're partnering, with city governments, and they're partnering with other nonprofits. And so it's really fascinating to me.
And did you think that was going to be better for Habitat for Humanity to make those partnerships?
Yes, and that was a big theme. And then we had the very final panel was, okay, where do we go next? And it's the partnerships
Mhm.
that need to be forged, and getting everybody into the room. I mean, I think I was in the back and I was talking to people, and I think that was one of the big benefits. The panels were enlightening, even for me who eats, drinks, and breathes this stuff.
Mhm.
But the chance to have everybody in the room. It's not just one sector. It's not just the nonprofits. It's not just the local government.
Everyone's going to
community
have to come
development
together to
planners.
make it work.
And that's the thing, and that's what they said, that they need to do more of that,
Mhm.
having those kinds of conversations. And then I think Emily Powell was there from Housing Resources of Western Colorado.
Okay.
She's headquartered here. She
Right.
covers that area, and she said that one of the things that she learned on a community visit just recently was, she said, somehow or another, local governments need to, you know, keep the easy things easy. Instead, they make the easy things hard and the hard things impossible.
Okay.
And
There you
so-
go.
I like this scenario. Yes.
And yeah, and so again, I think there are opportunities for partnerships. There are ways that private money can work with public money, can work with. There's just all kinds of options out there.
So what do you think's been stopping that?
Honestly, again, I'm a big red tape freak, but I
Mhm.
think a lot of it has to do with the red tape. And the other thing is, and Emily has shared this with me before, is the nonprofits, it actually costs them more to build an affordable housing unit
Mhm.
than it does the private sector.
Hmm.
Because you take all the regulations on the private sector, and then you layer on all the reporting requirements and requirements of these grants. And I think in one case, um, a local builder was able to do a townhome for about 375,000. If Housing Resources was involved, it went to 475,000.
Oh,
My goodness.
And so that's the other thing. It's
Oh,
like,
shocking.
and
so
that's
if you get a grant that covers that's for 100,000, and then it costs you the extra 100,000, you haven't done anything.
you have not done anything. And so one of the things that she was talking about, and again, we tend to focus on local and state, is she said it would be so much easier if the feds and the state would just say, okay, we have this pot of money, you bring us a project, and then we will just give a block grant to you to meet to do your project, instead of you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to use you got to use union labor, you got to do all of those things.
Mhm.
So
But they want the control that goes with that. I think that's the reason that when you see the grant, it's, I want to control how you do it and what you do, and it keeps
right, and
me in control.
right, and the excuse around that is, well, it's taxpayer money, and so we have got to put safeguards in place. So so everybody is having their challenges in this space, and I think a lot of it was eye-opening today for
Mhm.
different
I'm sure
sectors
it was.
to hear from each other. And again, I really think that hopefully more of those conversations will happen, and more of those collaborations, and more of those partnerships.
Mhm.
And what I think is interesting, you were talking about that they said that this is the taxpayers' money, so we have to be sure all those safeguards are in place. And yet you ask the taxpayer, and they're saying, "Why can't you do affordable housing?"
Right.
So
Right.
it's
I know.
nobody's communicating
Mhm.
Oh no, 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 no.
at all.
Mhm.
So anyway, and so it was I was really encouraged with it's that county only has 65,000 people in it, but it's the challenges are very similar. I mean, they have a housing gap just like we do. If you
Mhm.
haven't seen that study,
Right.
we're falling farther and farther behind. Plus, we're going to see this influx of new residents that we're going to have to do even more housing for, and we
That
just
they can't afford.
and they can't afford
So
it,
we're
and we're
putting
not
them
building
in
it.
apartments where they really don't want to be because that's the only thing they can afford to do is pay rent.
Well, and because they can't qualify.
Right. They
for the
can't
houses.
qualify. Yeah.
That's the other thing, is they can't qualify, and the finger always gets pointed at the private developer of, you guys are greedy, and you're only building $750,000 homes because you make so much profit on it. And one of our developers basically said, you know what, if you gave us incentives, I'd much rather, it's much simpler to build a smaller affordable unit, even the playing field, and I'll build all day long.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so
what playing field, and how does he want it evened?
So he's like, for instance, you waive, and this is in Garfield County,
Right.
they waive impact fees
Mm-hmm.
for nonprofits that are building affordable housing units.
Okay.
Why don't you do that for
Makes
me?
sense.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but you're doing it for them. Why don't you do it for me? I've already shown you I can build housing units. And frankly, I looked up the statistic a week or two ago because I was curious. Almost 99% of all the new housing that is built with private dollars. And so if you're not doing something with the private sector, the nonprofits are not going to be able to meet
They
the
can't.
need.
No, they can't meet the numbers.
And we as taxpayers can't afford to provide the kind of grant funding to move the needle. So you got to find ways to work with the private sector. He said, do this. He said, build my roads and streets.
Absolutely.
And take waive my impact fees if I'm building under a certain certain level of home.
Exactly.
I don't want you to have to do that for my $750,000 homes, right. But my $350,000 homes, then waive the fees.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a win-win for everybody.
When you said that they can't get the loan for the sidewalks and the streets, right. So why wouldn't the government?
So why not?
That?
Yeah.
And do you think maybe, at least locally, that our current city council would have no idea that were true?
I don't think so. I mean, honestly, that was news to me this morning. And again, and like I said, I operate in this space a lot. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't realize that some of the lending practices had changed for the private developers when it comes to that, what they call horizontal infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. I wonder when that changed. And look at all the codes that they could go back and not implement the newest code.
Right. And
because a lot of them, well, not just energy, but there's other code requirements that they have that may not be necessary either at the highest level, because I know they want to make the safest, best insulated, most energy efficient house they can. But at some point, I have a right to say, for less price, I'd rather have something that maybe wasn't.
Well, the unintended consequences of some things, and I mean, I think it's the 2024 Energy Code, the level of insulation and how you have to close up the housing space was because we didn't want any greenhouse gases getting out into the atmosphere. Now requires them to put in a fan for air movement because they're too tight.
They're too tight.
They're too tight.
They've been too tight for several years, actually. It's just getting worse all the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, again, but the builders and the rule makers, they have this adversarial role. Mm-hmm. The rule makers are like, we'll hold a hearing. And so the private sector says, great, here's our suggestions. And they go, thank you very much. And then they go back. I mean, they were simply checking the box and they go back to what they were going to do. So even though they've heard, they haven't listened.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And how does the average citizen who's seen money go up in smoke and not being able to afford, like somebody that's moving out of their parents' basement and wants to buy a house, right. How do they impact these two groups to say?
Well, I think that's it. And that was one of the other things that came up. And we're going to be facing some of that here too. But the president of their realtor association got up and said, here's the thing. We are at the end of the process and we simply sell the home for the buyer, for the seller to the buyer. We need to be involved way further upstream when they are talking about the comprehensive plan, when they are holding these meetings about the code changes to say, here's the impact. We haven't been in the room like we should be.
Right.
And that's what I would say is Joe Blow citizen needs to show, if you're concerned about this, you need to show up. And I've sat, I know that you two have done it too, but I have sat in meetings where we might be the only people there.
Yes,
And
exactly.
and so and again, talking to your elected officials, emailing your elected officials, anybody can do that. I mean, it's
Right.
really simple.
Right.
And so, and it has an impact. So that's what they can do. But we have to, and I think we're getting to the kind of, apex of the issue now, that enough people are upset about it, that, maybe we will see some real change that will kind of drive some of this affordability and back into the marketplace.
Well, and I understand there's a new committee being formed.
Well, we hope so.
We don't have that new committee.
So
I was if you ask me, I can start a rumor faster than anybody on the planet. I just say it's true, and then I look at you. It's not true. Fine.
Oh,
No,
well, fine, but everybody heard what you said first.
Right.
Yeah.
So what is the proposed committee, and how would it act
Right.
different than what we have?
There are members of the private sector, both realtors and home builders and contractors, who have said to the city that the city's getting ready, council's getting ready to go into a strategic planning session, and not just that we don't like the way things are, we have some suggestive solutions. And one of those is forming a committee. And I know a builder who has already volunteered to lead that committee, that is led by the private sector, that goes back and takes a look at what, in the city of Grand Junction specifically, what they have done, how they could do it differently, what might need to be rolled back, what could be implemented to make housing more affordable.
Right.
But have it be led by the private sector, not city staff. And let's actually take a look at what's on the books and what we can live without.
We're
Okay,
going to
so
have to do
let's-
something, that's for sure.
Let's look at city staff and how they actually operate or have operated in the past to create the problem that we have. So how did that happen, where we have these codes and all of these things that are hurting the builders, and the builders are going, we can't do anything? How did that occur?
Well, again, I will give the city staff credit. And I think we actually had a couple of candidates that ran for city council on this. They formed stakeholder groups. I was on the stakeholder group, for instance, for impact fees. They had a stakeholder group for the One Grand Junction Comprehensive Plan back in 2020. And so they've had the committees. Sometimes some of the people on there have been kind of hand selected.
And they're selected by the staff?
I think recommended by the staff.
Okay.
And so, I can tell you there are people that sat on the code rewrite committee. There was a big committee. I think it took 18 months to get there. And all along the line, they kept saying, this is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem. And it got implemented anyway. And so now we have city staff having to go back, and we see all these multiple changes to the code because they were hearing but not listening. And the other thing that I will say that I have an issue with is the hiring of outside consultants to come in and make recommendations of how things should be. And I honestly believe that we are very smart people in this community, and that, I think you could be much more effective bringing together those affected by a particular issue or topic or regulation, and sitting down and seeing what might work versus hiring a firm out of Boulder to come in with
agree with you.
with their recommendations.
We have been there too much.
We have been there too much. And I mean, the amount of money that we have spent on consultants, I mean, we could definitely have built at least half a dozen Habitat for Humanity houses in just the last couple of years.
Right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's that they've, it's been there on the surface that we're getting stakeholder involvement. We have engaged GJ. We have, we're really working with the community. But at the end of the day, the recommendation that comes forward from staff doesn't include some of the things that came out of those sessions.
And maybe the stakeholders that they engaged for committees were not the people that really needed to be there, because maybe they didn't know about them, or that particular person didn't match their
Yeah.
what they thought
Well,
I was gonna
needed
say
to be
it's
the
handpicked.
requirement.
Well, and politics come into play on this. And
Yes.
again, I hate to go back to 4th and 5th Street because I'm tired of talking about it. But it's like
I'm not.
if you go down to the farmers market to gather your input, that's going to be a certain type of clientele
Yes.
that may or may not be reflective of the community at large.
Exactly.
The same thing, and you guys have been there as well. I absolutely know that there are staff that call up some of their friends that believe the same way they do and say, hey, you got to come to city council and testify. Otherwise, we're going to get run over. I mean, it's politics. And so we see that kind of nonsense going on too.
So I'm going back because I asked this the other day, and I think it's really important. I think the community feels like they have no say because they've seen what happened to 4th and 5th. They see everything, even if they go, maybe it doesn't make a difference. And I question, where should the vision for what we want Grand Junction to look like come from? And I think that it has to be asking the community, is this something you even want to spend our time on? Because I was just looking through some of the things, and I don't know that this is accurate, but it was like what Henry Brown had proposed for things that he thought needed to be in the budget. And I'm going, but let's start at the very beginning. Does Mesa County, Grand Junction, is that the most important issue for them, whether we have a complete street or not? Or would they like to see affordable housing? Would they like to see things maintained that we already have? Where and who's listening to them? Who's listening to where do we get our vision and our direction?
So I'm going to go back to, I think it's the comp plan, which was due for an update this year, and no money was allocated in the budget. But I think that is the place where that's where you start. That's the foundation. We've all heard it. Staff refers to it was in the comp plan that we wanted these things. So,
but it was that the staff wanted these things.
Well, and yeah.
Well, because you were engaged because you were asked to be on the committee. But I know Ruth and I. Right. And it was during COVID, and nobody knew about this wonderful comp plan that had to be done.
So let me back up a little bit.
Every 10 years.
But. Honestly, in our case, I think 5 is when it should happen. It'll be like 6 if they get to it next year. But Mike Bennett has talked about their comp plan in Fruta, and they engaged on a much more individual engagement level. They had over 3,000 people in Fruta that had the opportunity to provide input into their plan. And that's what they based their plan on. And he said, we went overboard in community outreach and coffees and meetings.
There is no overboard.
No,
there is no overboard.
But
I understand.
That may be my word, not his. But he was like, you have to have a level of community engagement that is outside the norms in terms of really setting the direction. And I don't think we did that in 2020.
We did not.
And so I would hope that the council would look at this in terms of the update. And I mean, if Fruta had 3,000, we should have 10. We should have 10,000 people that have the opportunity and provide input and provide comment and say, here's what I want to see. That's where it starts. Right. And so I would hope the city would look at doing that.
Well, I contend there is no utopian view. And what the city planners at this particular moment are looking at is that utopian view. Everything perfect and everything in its place. And it doesn't fit our
well, and you can't
afford it.
I mean, I look at
it just
even the
doesn't fit us.
concept of a complete street on every paved street.
Excuse me.
To have these wide sidewalks and all of it, you can't afford it.
So,
and that's all you'd spend your money on. And if you ever want an Orchard Mesa pool, forget about it because there is no money.
So Trent Prawl may call me up after this podcast airs, but I was told by one of our builders that that stretch of F&a-half road off of 24 right there by the movie theaters, it's a half a mile. And it's built to the new transportation engineering design standards. It has the separated sidewalks and the bicycles and the lighting and all of that sort of thing. That half mile costs $13 million.
That does not surprise me.
No.
And so,
And it's not exactly what I would call friendly.
no, well, it's got white ballers on it too if you drive it.
Yes.
But again, this is the thing, and I will say, I know I and others stood up during that process and said, have you calculated how much this is going to cost?
And I think all of them should, before you even propose something, say, this is how much it's going to cost, and this is how we're going to pay for it. Because I think you need to know, well, where's that money going to come from? Is it going to come from just from the city's general maintenance budget? Is it going to come from taxes? Is it going to come from user fees? Where is the money to do the project?
Right.
And I think that if you put that out there, people would go, well, that's nice, but
And again,
that's not how we want to pay for it.
The bicycle, the bicycle pedestrian plan. I know I was there when they adopted it, and I know that several of us got up and said, in fact, at the planning commission, I think Keith Eller said, have you all calculated how much this is going to cost? It's not that I'm against bicycles. I think it would be great.
Yeah.
But can we afford it? And we won't know if we can afford it or not until you put real dollars to it.
Exactly.
And that's what's happened with these plans, is there's no real dollars to
And
things
there's
like
no priority based on the community. Say, I think that if they looked at it, city council could pretty well say, people want housing to be more affordable.
Yep.
That would be something.
It would be really nice if we would actually stick to a budget one time, because you can budget everything out and everything looks really good on paper. And then they say, well, we can do this, but it's going to be over budget. That's okay. We'll find it somewhere else, and they just don't do it. If you can't afford it, you can't have it.
Yeah.
And if it's not a priority,
Right.
it shouldn't be being done.
It shouldn't be done.
Until all the priorities have been completed.
Right. And
We've
you've
got these 3 priorities.
and and again, I think a process of community engagement is really where we want to go. And I think I'm encouraged, frankly, that on the workshop on Monday night, a plan for more community outreach between the city council and the citizens outside of that 3 minutes at a public hearing when they've already decided how they're going to vote.
Right.
I'm encouraged that we're maybe going to see some of that. But yeah, it's just been kind of bass backwards.
Well, so on that note, let's tell the people right now, if you have an interest at all, come to the Monday planning. You don't get a chance to say anything, but you will hear. And then you can do your texting, your emailing, or whatever else.
One of you two that have your phone right here, because mine's being used, tell them what's going to be on the agenda. The important
I don't have my phone with me.
I can tell you, I kind of have it memorized. So there are several major issues on the agenda for Monday night. And come to the meeting I will echo your comments, but if you can't make it to the meeting, just remember that every one of the city council meetings is online. You can watch it at your leisure afterwards. I get more out of it just watching the reactions. But here's what's on the tap for Monday night. They are going to look at contracting with a consultant that they know to do a housing needs assessment update. How far behind are we again?
Okay, and before you stop, do we have any idea how long that's going to take? Or
the email I saw said once they contract with them, there's several things they're going to have them do, but one is a housing needs assessment. Then they're going to update their housing strategic plan that the council will be adopting, and that process is supposed to take somewhere around 9 or 10 months.
Okay.
Then so again, there's that piece of it. They are going to talk about the community engagement options that Mike Bennett is proposing for them. And there's something else related to housing, and I wish I could remember what it was. But there are 3 topics around housing that are going to be on the agenda. Just an update of where we are. So staff is going to share what kind of progress they've made, where they are, that sort of thing. So all of that, I think, is important, and we need to know it.
Exactly. So our outside consultant, again, that we're going to hire,
Yes.
Is that coming from the Eastern Slope?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
they're smarter over on the Eastern Slope. It must be true.
Well, the consultant they're using that was named in the email I saw which I was surprised because I didn't know that there'd even been a bidding process for this, but is Root Policy Center. And the city has used them before to do their housing needs assessment.
So did they let out bids?
So
then?
I honestly don't know.
A good question to ask.
But there's again, the reason being given for all of this is that they want to apply for more grant funding for housing. And so they need to do some of these things. Oh, and that's the other thing that's on the agenda is they are going to talk about, I'm not sure how this plays out, but updating elements of the comprehensive plan, which we were just talking about. That's on the agenda as well. So there's like 5 big topics.
That I mean, each one of those could take up a whole meeting.
Oh yeah, each one of them could take 4 hours.
Yes.
That's going to be, yeah, bring your popcorn, maybe your sleeping bag.
Well, they will let you bring food or drink.
That's true. That's true.
Go outside for breaks. But you can bring your
Order
sleeping
pizza.
bag.
Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, and I just find it interesting that all of this stuff is going to be on one night's agenda.
And do you, I'm trying to trust them, but do you understand why it all needs to be on one agenda? And
Oh, I do not. And again, with the comp plan, they're already behind the 8 ball. And it's like, I don't want to see them parcel out elements of the comp plan.
Mhm.
I want them to go back and do a full update with lots of community participation.
that's
It's
what
what
I
it
think.
needs to be done.
Yeah.
And we have advocated for that for a couple of years now, since we
Mhm.
finally decided that this is the way things are going.
Mhm.
Community input is invaluable.
Yeah. And so anyway, but all that is on the agenda Monday night, 5:30 at the fire station on 6th and U.
Yeah, and I think people don't know that either. They'd all
Yeah.
show up to City Hall
You
because
do-
that's
you
where
would.
meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Typically are. And so,
Yeah.
so that one is actually at the fire station at 6th and U, starts at 5:30.
That's going to be a little hard to get everybody into, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's a pretty small space.
It sure
Mhm.
is. We've
So-
been there.
So you need to be early.
Yes.
For a really long meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to bring my
Oh.
jammies.
Just wear your jammies there. That way you don't have to change.
Right.
I just want to go back to and kind of, I know when you ran for city council, some of the things that you said just made so much sense. And I know we have a new city manager, so that seems to be moving us in the right direction.
Agreed.
But there are still things like you said, how the staff growth has made, I feel sorry for city council because I feel like it's like 800 people against 7 because they have so much ability to give them so much. And I'm just going to say crap because we watched them when they had that, when they looked at the budget and said, oh, we're going to tell you if it was done right. And everybody up there just glazed.
It looked like deer in the
There
headlights.
is no way that
no
you
way.
understood all of that. And then
Oh, no.
says, well, there were, we got this packet ahead of time and it was 400 pages. And I thought, you have to be honest. You cannot read 400 pages that is technical, understand it and go, oh yes, I've got it all. So I don't have any questions. And then at the end, it was like, and we can't guarantee the veracity of our statements. I'm like,
Well, and again, they get those 400-page packets on like Thursday for a Monday
Right.
meeting.
right.
Yeah, or even Tuesday for a Wednesday meeting.
And it's wrong. It's too much. It's like trying to drink out of a fire hose. They can't do it. And I just think it overwhelms you. And then you just sit there
And we get
and
absolutely
let
nothing done.
whatever happen because
Right.
you don't know if they're right, wrong.
So I would be very surprised. Again, going back to the most recent campaign, I would be very surprised. And if I were a city department, I would not be looking to add staff in any department. And possibly you may want to look at eliminating some positions because at the end of the day, when you take out some of the, dedicated funding for street maintenance and, the enterprise funds for the golf course and all the rest of it, the general fund's major budget is people.
Right.
And so if you're going to make a difference in it,
You eliminate.
And you certainly don't add. And again, I think that's that's where we are with the state. That's why we're looking at this huge deficit.
But we are running a business. We need to run it as a business, not as a vacation plan.
Right. Well, and it's not
Retirement
saying
plan.
that any of the people are not doing their job that
No,
they were assigned
no.
to. It's just, do we need those
Do we need those
Positions.
jobs done?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do we need that? I mean, let's go back to the core issue, the core things. And again, grant funds. The state took all of those COVID grant funds and created permanent programs. And I mean, and so that's why that's where we're in a hole. And I think to a certain extent, we did some of the same stuff here, which is again why I think a private led committee that's really focused on what I think, and I hope I'm not wrong, is a huge community priority with regard to housing affordability, to go in and take a look at that.
Well, maybe another committee that looks at how do we maintain what we have, because that's where I see the city falling down. And you could see, like Nina Anderson said, I have this alley, and they say, well, that's your responsibility to have it paved or whatever you want. And I'm going, no, it's the city owns it, so why is it an individual? Well, because if I'm spending my money somewhere else, I can't give you that money to do that, and that's a core responsibility.
Right. The budget needs to align with the community's
Exactly.
priorities. I mean, it's that simple.
Right. And
yeah.
they might also want somebody for homelessness, because since they've said that's a major issue for us. And I did think it was kind of interesting. I looked at Boulder. Do you know that Boulder only has 450 homeless people? That's what they claim. Then you can give personal attention to 450 people, but
You can't do the 3,000 that we've got or
Yeah.
plus.
Well, I question our numbers, frankly.
Yeah, well, yeah, I do too. I do too.
So that is interesting. So
yeah, it was just a thing when I was looking through. They had all these statistics, and I thought, well, that's really interesting. And
And Gossip
I
has it
thought
too.
it was interesting too, because we get a lot of the push for climate change, or for the having grants for bikes, or having whatever, complete streets. And the average commute in Boulder is 23 minutes. The average family in Boulder has 2.2 cars. So I'm like, now hold on a second, guys, that are promoting this other thing.
Right.
We actually talked about that a little bit at the housing summit. I can't remember which panelist was talking about it, but they were like, so yeah, we get a lot of requests for like bike lanes and these kinds of things being added. And actually the community development director for one of the cities said, so here's the deal. I'm not a bike only. I probably never will be, but I'm going to be driving my car. So we need to plan for cars. And that's just the reality. And if we can find ways, and I think there are ways that you can accommodate bicyclists and pedestrians, but again, you don't need 8-foot lanes for a bicycle,
Right.
or 8-foot sidewalks for pedestrians.
But you know what? In college, the whole time I was there, I rode my bike without a bike lane.
And you're here.
I'm here going to Greeley. I went UNC. Greeley had no special. It was share the road. And it's not that I'm saying you can't have that. That's not a nice amenity. And I'm not anti-bike. I know it sounds like I am. But I'm just saying, realistically, people have been riding their bikes. Those that were going to ride their bikes, and they figure out how to get there.
And they figure out how to get there.
Right.
Well, and again, going back to, if we spent $13 million on a half mile of road, we're not, I mean, we all drive. I think the second priority has to be transportation.
Right.
But we all drive, but we're not going to be able to relieve congestion anytime soon if it costs us $26 million a mile to add new streets. So again, there's
what makes sense.
What makes sense?
Yeah. Well, I'm done with questions. Do you have anything you want to ask? Or
I could ask from now on, but no,
Yeah.
I think on this particular segment, I think I've said my piece.
And you?
Okay.
Do you have anything?
No, except I would again advise you all to go look at the Common Sense Institute's housing affordability study, because they do show statistics for Mesa County, and our problem is getting worse, and it's going to get even worse if we all don't just get engaged, get involved, and make some changes.
Amen. Get on
Amen.
committees.
Yep.
Okay, you have been watching Miss County Compass. This is the facts as we see them, the truth as we know it. You decide. Thanks, Dianne.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Diane.
Thanks for
Appreciate it.
having me.